Hi everyone, welcome to the new episode of PodTest. Today we're going to discuss about different testings which are required in the three-tier architecture. So you are already aware about different types of testing which we perform in our day-to-day activities. So like manual testing, API testing, database testing, performance testing, security testing, UI automation, again different flavors of it, and there are many more. So today we're going to discuss some of them to understand like what area of the three tier architecture they fits in and why those testings are required and what impact they have on the overall performance or overall functioning of the application. So let's try to understand that. So as we discussed in our last episode, like what all components we have as part of our three tier architecture. So the first part is the front end part, so which is the first tier. Second is the backend part, which is like the brain of the application, where the most of the processing happens. Like it is something which absorbs the API and gives out the response from here to the front end or to the any of its client. Third is the database layer, where the data gets stored. So this is first tier, this is second tier, and this is the third part of the tier, right? Now let's start with the most important testing, which is the manual testing. Now to be a good tester, you would have heard from a lot of people that the core area of our expertise should be on manual testing. If you don't know how to do manual testing, then you will face issues in identifying the scenarios or the cases which are required to be automated, right? You need to have that mindset, and you need to have those techniques in place where you could identify the required test cases. So this is the first thing which you start on when you're asked to do some testing on a piece of software, right? So manual testing. Now if you would see, like when you're asked, right, you are provided a URL or an application where you're asked to do the testing. So what do you get? You get a URL, like let's say facebook.com, right? So this will be like a Facebook, right? So that will be the URL for you. So what all inputs you would require? You just require the URL. You need to know the flows, right? Or you can just log in into the application and start knowing the flow. Or you will get a requirement document or any other form of document where the requirements are mentioned. So maybe a agile story or epic link or something else, right? In that case, you will get the required inputs for you to develop your understanding and to create some test cases. So like let's take for example, like you want to someone asks you to test the login functionality of Facebook. So what you will do is you will open the URL, right? So one of the test cases there could be that a valid login, right, to the application. So so Facebook should be allowing us to do a valid login. Second test case could be that that if you provide incorrect password, Facebook should not allow you to do the login part, right? So let's take these two examples, right? And for that, right, let's take the first case where you are allowed to log in with the valid passwords. So what you'll do is you will open the URL, you will navigate to the, you will open the URL, right? So you will open URL. Second, you will do like you will provide the username, password to it, right? And then you will be, let's say, clicking on the submit button, right? So you will be doing that. Now once you click on that submit button, a new page will open up, right? And that is your validation point. You need to verify that the name on the profile is according to the username which was used, right? That it opens the correct profile based on the username password it received. So that is your validation point. So that is I'm just trying to explain like what manual testing means, right? So that is like you're doing it like by opening the browser and doing the stuff by yourself. So all that part belongs to manual testing. Now what all components within the three tier it impacts? Let's see. So first of all, you're already targeting the UI part, right? You opened the URL, so you are already testing, okay, on the UI how things looks like. Now second thing, when you provided this username and password, right, after providing the username and password, and when you clicked on submit, right, there would be an API fired which would have been processed by the backend. So in a way you are already testing the processing of the backend, whether something is already happening or whether the backend is working properly or not. And then what backend will be doing is backend will be sending those username and password to the DB, right, to the DB. And the DB, what DB will do is DB will check whether those username password exist and whether they are correct, and if they are, it will start responding, right, and then the response will be received by backend, and then it will be passing it back to the UI, right, and based on the response it receives on the UI, the page will be loaded. So if you would see, when you are doing manual testing, right, you are not just testing UI, all three components gets into the picture, or any other component which is required to process that logic, right, gets invoked or gets involved. So that is how the manual testing is done, and it covers all three parts, right, and that is why manual testing is very crucial, right. Now coming on to the second type of testing, which is UI automation. See, the purpose of having a UI automation is that you wanted to reduce the redundant work, right. You have multiple releases, you have multiple cycles of testing required for testing of a particular version of a software, right. So in that case, instead of doing things manually again and again and again, what you do is you have a utility in place which is named as UI automation, which you can create and then start using it for testing your application, right. What UI automation does is it again navigates to the UI and does all the operation which you were doing manually, right, and it does all the stuff, and it is interacting with all the components, right, internally. But for you, the face is the UI, right. So this is what it is targeting. So again, the UI part only, right. Now coming on to the third part, which is performance testing. So as I explained in my previous episode, right, performance testing, performance could be anywhere, right, performance issues could be anywhere. Let's say on the UI, right, there is an image which is very heavy, right, and when the page is getting rendered, that image needs to be loaded and rendered on the page, and let's say it is consuming a lot of processing time and CPU processor and the memory, right, for it to get loaded. So there could be other logics, right, on the kind of framework which you would have used to build this UI. So the performance testing could identify the issues which could be prevailing on the UI also, right. So performance testing can target UI also. Similarly, let's say that you did the login part, right, when you did the username password, right, when you provided the username password and click the submit, right, and let's say that this complete transition, like how it happened. So it started from here, right, it then sent the data here, right. After this, some processing happened here, right, and then the output, there was a query made to the database, right, and then there was some processing which was done here, and then again it replied back to this, and then the reply was given to this, right, again after doing some processing here, right. So if you would see, right, it while just running this login thing also, all three components came into picture, and there could be performance issue in any of these, right, or in all of these, right. As I said, on the UI side, let's say that on login there's a profile page which needs to come up, and there's a lot of information which needs to be rendered. So there could be some sections or some pages on the profile which could be creating some problem, and they are taking time, longer time than what is expected. So you could identify such cases when you're targeting the performance testing, and your area of concern is the UI, right. You could identify those cases. Similarly, let's say on the backend side, right, the API itself to process this username password and then sending the next query to DB, right, maybe that processing logic itself is taking some more time, right. So you could get those answers by doing the performance testing and seeing like how much the API, how much robust is the API, and is it able to meet the SLAs which we have in the application. And similarly on the database side, right, whether we can using performance testing again, we can identify whether maybe, let's say, there are any deadlocks or something else, right, which is happening within the database because of this query, right? So this could be happening here also. So that's why performance testing has been placed in all three sections here, right? Performance testing could be used to find the issues on UI, it could be used to find issues on API, it could be used to find issues in database. Now coming on to the next part, let's say API testing, right? Now API testing is another very important part, right? So when you're testing API, you are testing the brain of the application, right? Because see, let's say today you're using this front end, right? Tomorrow, let's say that this is the front end, and let's take an example. Let's say that Indian Railways, right? They have a platform where they show the trains in and out time, right? In and out time. So they have a backend in place where they have created they have a database, they have a backend, and they have exposed some APIs, and those APIs are exposed, right? Now railways could have their own UI, right? So it could be UI, right, which is owned by the government of India, right, let's say, and they are consuming this API, right? So this UI is connected to this backend, and backend is connected to the DB, right? Let's say tomorrow there is another Paytm, right? Now Paytm starts showing you that Paytm also wants to show the users the arrival time, the departure time of the trains, right? So what it will do, it will get in contact with the government of India and ask that, okay, or the railways, to ask them that, okay, we want to use your APIs, can you please expose those APIs to us so that we can show it on our UI, right? So what I'm trying to explain is, like, a single backend, right, can provide inputs or can be a brain for a lot of different applications. Paytm, it could be, let's say, Amazon. Now Amazon also shows the same information, and maybe some other sites, right? Make My Trip and everything else, right? So all these UIs, right, these are different companies or different UIs or the URLs which we would be using, right? But the brain is one, right, which is coming from this particular let's say, from, if we take the example of railways, so it is coming from there, right? So testing of APIs is very important, right? Because this is the API which every one of them are going to consume, right? Their UI are different, but the APIs which they would be consuming from the Indian Railways would be same. So this is a very important part of testing. Now coming on to database testing, another important area, right? But again, it depends, like, what is the scope of testing there. Let's say that you want to test the schema of the application. You are given a requirement document and say that, okay, go and check whether the schema is as per what is being documented in the requirement docs, right? So what you will do is you will open the tables, you will check whether the table has those numbers of columns or not, whether the data type which is used for that column, whether it meets the recommendations or not, whether there is a unique, like, there we have different attributes, right? Like, let's say unique, not null, right? Whether those attributes are in place for that particular field or the column or not, right? So you can do all the testing. Second testing could be, let's say that there is a foreign key constraint or a primary, what all primary key we need to have. So those kind of testing also covers under database testing. There could be data migration testing which is required. Let's say you are migrating from you had an schema, right? When you were, let's say, for a startup, right, they had one database which they created when they started off, but the schema was not so robust that could be scaled up to a next level. And over the years the company has grown, and now they are seeking out a robust and a next level of database, right? And now they have planned a new schema there. So what they will do is they will do some data migration. Now to do the data migration, they would be mapping their old data fields to the new data fields, and they will be exporting the data to the new database. And in that case, what is happening is, so what I'm trying to say is, see, this is one database which is old, right, and this is new database. So this is old and this is new database or the schema, right? And there is some transformation which has happened, and you wanted to export the data to the new database. Now you want to check whether the data has been received in the right columns, right tables, right? So what you will do is you will be creating those queries here, and you will be creating some queries here, right? some SQL queries. Let's say if it is a relational database, you will be creating some SQL queries here, and you will extract out some data, and then here on the new schema also you will create some SQL queries, and then what you'll do is you will be doing a comparison between the outputs of these two queries and see like whether they match or not. And how do you do that comparison? It could be using the joins, it could be using the unions or the intersects, or any other way, right, which could be employed there. So accordingly you will get the answers and you can do that testing, right? So that is what database testing could be, and there could be more part of it. Now coming on to the next part, or the last one which I have mentioned in this slide, which is the security testing. Now this is a very specialized area of testing. People require to know a lot of things before delving into it, but as you can see, right, security testing, similar to performance testing, can be a part of any component. It could be from the UI, API, database, right? So what happens is, like, let's say that there is a security lapse in the UI itself. Now let's say that on the UI itself anyone can provide any password, right, and they are able, and once they click on submit, they are able to log in. So this is a security lapse on the UI, right? The checks are not in place, and that is what will trouble the security testing. And let's say, let me take another example. Let's say that when you, if you would have noticed, when you're logging, right, there is some kind of authentication mechanism in place. Let's say that authentication mechanism is placed on a token number, right, which gets generated from backend, or let's say from the framework which is employed to create this backend. So let's say that the request was sent from the UI to the backend, right? It generated a token here, and then it sent this back, right, saying that okay, this is the token, and now consume it. And in any other, and in your next calls, right, whenever you will be sending me those new calls, please include that token here, right? See, right? So let's say that user 1 generated a token, let's say T1, right, and there's a user 2 which generated a token T2, right? Now let's say that user 2, right, starts consuming token 1, right, token 1, and starts let's say hitting the API, right, and provide this token, the token of the other user in its own call, and starts hitting the backend. And if there is a security lapse on the backend, right, the second user will get access to the data of user 1, which is again a security concern, right? So by doing security testing, you are identifying the areas, right, the security lapse which you could have in any of your layers, right? So that is what we try to target when we do security testing. And this is in crux, I mean, this is the core part of our testing, and this is all what we do, right? And there could be other flavors, other kind of testings which we could be performing, but on the majorly side, these are the ones. And for the people who have started new in testing, for you, I think the most important areas are manual testing, UI automation, and API testing to start with. And yes, some of the understanding on the database side. You should be knowing, like, you should have that understanding, like what is a database, how the tables structure are, and what all columns it could have, right? Just read through it and write and learn to create some select queries. So and for people who are like more on an advanced side, or who are already in the industry for quite a time, I think they would already be aware about manual testing and stuff. So I would recommend for them that start working on the API side more, right? Plus the UI automation. Again, UI automation is different flavors. You could be using Java, Selenium. You could be using JavaScript based frameworks, right? Now that is again a separate discussion altogether, where you would be using Java or the JavaScript based frameworks. But today, in today's session, my area of discussion was to make you all aware, like what all kind of testing we can perform. And I hope you were able to get some insights about it, and you were able to find something useful out of it. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for joining in, and we'll meet you in the next episode. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the session today and would have learned something new. If you did, please subscribe the channel and do share the content with others as well.